The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the Weymouth Community Access staff or its board of directors. WCA, in compliance with FCC regulations, is prohibited from exercising control over the content of independent member-produced public access programming.
Hello, this is Trish and I'm with the Back River Watershed Association. Spring is starting to spring up around Weymouth, and you always know it's springtime coming when you find Phil Lofgren on the run. I'm here with Phil Lofgren, and look who we found on the run the other day.
Yeah, we're here at the Iron Hill Sluice Gate, and we're here with Stephen Hickey, myself, Phil Lofgren. We're doing a little maintenance that has to be done. That hasn't been done for a while, I know that. The grease here on the sluice gate is all dried up. Things were starting to bind a little bit. We got them free flowing now. This sluice gate's very important to have, not only for flood control, but to adjust water to the stream for the Heron. We usually run about 4 cubic feet per second in the ladders, and we run another 4 cubic feet per second in the sluiceway. That gives us 8 cubic feet in the river, and that's an important amount. It's an important flow for the Heron. It's adequate, yet it's not excessive. We're just happy we can do this job. Steve and I have been partners now for a long time.
20 years.
Along with George Loring, George is not here today. We didn't know we were going to do this project. It was done on the spur of the moment. We were able to call Trish Price, and she was able to get down here and do a little filming for her show. And we're always happy to lend a hand for those who want to get the message out to the community about how the herring run is cared for, about the hours it takes to maintain the herring run. A rough estimate is 800 hours a year. And that's 3 guys. So that's about it. That's the message I want to get out, that this is not only a 6 weeks maintenance problem at herring time, but it is a maintenance problem year round. Keeping the stream nice, keeping it fresh, keeping the water quality where it should be. We have a street on Water Street that has a bunch of commercial businesses. They're not always kind to the stream, so keeping an eye on it and make sure it's not polluted is important. It's a very important part of the warden's job. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, Trish.
Phil, always happy to have you and Steve and see you guys on the run. It's really important. So why is the flow so important? You know, why do we need a certain amount of water? Some people might say, oh, there's some water there, what's the problem?
Well, you want to be able to cover the fish's back with enough water, yet you don't want the flow so excessive that they can't make their climb. The climb here is, to this part of the dam, is 64 feet. It's another 10 feet over the dam at Whitman's Pond. In 3/4 of a mile, that's an elevation climb of like 74 feet. So it's important that the water be regulated properly, not too slow so that the predators get at the fish, and not too quick so that they can't make their journey. We have to keep an eye on this every day. Every day the water flows are checked in the morning, along with a reader from the counter to show us the number of fish that passed in one day. Everything's checked and checked again. That's it.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for all you do.
It was a pleasure.
Hi, I'm here with Steve Hickey on the run, getting ready for the herring run season. Steve, what's happening here?
Well, we're just putting final touches on everything to make sure everything works before the fish come in. We did this sluice gate and make sure that's going to be profitable, and it works fine. Put this little fence out here for the fish. We changed around all these pine bars. We fixed all the ladders, the Boy Scout stands, doing platform. George and another person, I'm not sure who he was, put the stones at the Pope building in the pipe that goes underground to keep the water from going straight through. So what it does, it kind of like you put boulders in and the water goes around so the fish don't get washed back down. So we did that. And what else did they do? Oh, you know what they did is they cleaned the Venetian pool out this spring. With,
Phil, a lot of maintenance is required for the run, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And this year was particularly involved with the replacement of baffle boards on the dam at Whitman's Pond.
What's a baffle board?
A baffle board is a device that allows the fish to climb the ladders. It diverts water in a special way. So we replaced a lot of baffle boards this spring. Getting back to that, it was quite time consuming. We ran out of baffle boards, and we're in the process of reordering. One particular baffle board up at Whitman's Pond required a couple hours to replace because it didn't want to come out of the slots. The wood had swollen and had to be chiseled out. So when I speak of maintenance and I say 800 hours a year, that's one person's time. If you're talking about man hours, it would be much more than that. As soon as the ice was off the pond this year, we got busy with maintenance. We're going to be in good shape, maintenance-wise. We don't have the volunteers because of COVID. We certainly love to have them here, not only to help us with maintenance, but for them to experience the run itself. It's important to get people connected to this run. It's been in operation since the town was chartered back in the 1600s. Certainly the Indian population enjoyed the fruits of spring. These keystone fish provided them with sustenance through the winter months, as it did the colonial people when they first came to Weymouth, Hingham, and Cohasset. Anyway, we have maintenance pretty much cleaned up this year. We're waiting for the fish. We got it done none too soon. We started early. The fish have arrived in Plymouth, the few scouts, and I saw that a fish arrived in Pembroke 2 days ago. So that would be like March 20th. So we're waiting for the arrival of our fish, and I don't expect them here till mid-April. We're a little later here in Weymouth. That's about it as far as maintenance goes. We're good to go this year. Even with COVID, we're ready to go.
Phil, with you and Steve and George managing the run and maintaining it, it doesn't surprise me that you're ready for them. You know, anything that gets put in your path, you always manage to take care of the run, and we have to thank Phil and the 3 Herring Run wardens for that. A few years back, a film student from Emerson College sent me an email, and Phil and I worked on a documentary about the herring. Phil, that was an awful lot of fun, and I really got to understand an awful lot about the importance of the fish. And you'll see Phil in this next clip from the documentary that we're going to run, and it really kind of gets in a little bit of scientific detail about why they are so important and why the Back River Watershed Association considers the base of the herring run through Jackson Square oh so fragile.
Forage fish is a general term that is basically a catch-all for all the small things in the ocean that the big things eat. They're bigger than plankton, but they're smaller than tuna. And they tend to be fish that are small and silver, like herring. Herring are a big part of the forage guild, or the forage group of species. But there are several species of herring, and they all look pretty similar at a glance, but ecologically they're very different from each other. The herring that people are usually talking about when they talk about pickled herring is Atlantic herring. It's a species that lives its whole life out in the ocean. But the herring we're talking about now are river herring, and these are several different species. They look like Atlantic herring, just slightly different. It takes a little experience to tell them apart. But what they have in common is all the river herrings go upstream to spawn in the spring, much in the way that salmon do. They include blueback herring, and alewife, and several species that we call shad. The river herring, and actually almost all other herrings, play a critical role in the entire global food web because they sit right in the middle of the food web. They feed mostly on tiny shrimp-like creatures called zooplankton. These animals eat phytoplankton, or marine floating plants, and concentrate important oils and fats, especially omega-3 fatty acids. These particular chemicals, a type of fat, are extremely important in building the membranes of nerve cells. So they're critical to the early development of a child's brain. And of course, the brain of any other animal. And they're a major conduit carrying the sun's energy and other nutrients that go into making up protein, body tissues, carrying all of that good stuff through the food web to the higher levels where big predators are and where we are. So herring are not only an abundant and ready source of food in the ocean, they have a special importance because of the nutrition that they carry.
We recognize that they're a keystone species. They're a prime driver. They basically fill the physical role of the Pacific salmon in these coastal waterways. This interface between the marine and freshwater environment. These are the prime nutrient drivers. These are the prime fodder species for multiple loops in the ecological web. Looking at the eastern seaboard and knowing that alewives were, endemic to everywhere from the Carolinas all the way up to the Canadian Maritimes, were highly prolific, existed in nearly every river system that occurred on the eastern seaboard, provided it was marginally passable, and to have degraded the habitat to such a degree that the population is being considered for listing as threatened or endangered, it should be very sobering. We've had that great of an impact on the spawning habitat of this fish. The inability of the fish to access historical habitat has led to the decline of the species by up to 90% up and down the eastern seaboard. We're seeing nothing but horror stories about the decline of this species.
The causes of that decline are probably numerous. You have dams preventing their upstream migration and limiting their mating success. You have pollution in those same river systems. You had harvest directly of Atlantic herring by humans. You have predation on river herring and Atlantic herring. You have incidental take or bycatch of river herring in other fisheries. All of those things have likely contributed in some way to the steady decline of river herring for probably 100 or more years.
If you broaden the picture to 100, 200 years, it's a picture of tremendous decline, really depressing decline in the size of these river herring runs.
We sort of bottomed out in 2005, 2006, and that alerted sort of the whole coast to the fact that we had a problem with the river herring.
It took a while to understand how deep the declines were. Since 2006, we've had a ban on possession harvest in Massachusetts. So I think we've really had a sharp reduction in the amount of fish that are available in Massachusetts. And right now, the past 3-4 decades, we're basically debating over the historic low.
What we see today is just a faint echo, a shadow of the enormous fish migrations that we hear in pre-colonial times.
If you think back to, before the turn of last century, you had river herring runs that were supporting bait fisheries that were producing millions of fish for bait. And those fisheries are gone.
Investigators from our team from the University of New Hampshire have discovered that in much of the North Atlantic, the biomass of fish may have been anywhere from 10 to 20 times or more what we are seeing today. And particularly strongly affected have been anadromous fish like river herring. When river herring numbers plummet, it's not just an indication that some predators or fishermen are likely to suffer. It's a symptom of a much deeper and more expansive change going on in the system. And that change may have much greater implications for us than just the number of river herring.
In the last few years, we're basically counting herring when their populations have bottomed out. And their population level should be up here, and we're counting the little blips from year to year. And this year we may have a larger blip.
So what we're really seeing when we see river herring numbers go up or down is a view directly into the heart, the beating heart of the global ecosystem. We're just seeing our little reflection of it.
There are issues happening in the watersheds that we don't fully understand. These watersheds in Massachusetts have been greatly altered by human population growth and development. So we're trying to learn about what's happening in the watershed. We're trying to learn about what's happening out in the ocean that affects their mortality and recruitment. But I think we have a long ways to go before we fully understand what got us in this present state of having very low populations.
When I was 16 years old, I explored just about every stream within a 100-mile radius of Weymouth, which let me fish a lot of Plymouth, a lot of the Cape, on a daily basis. I had an opportunity to fish on the Vineyard for 20 years. I had an opportunity to see what it was like in 1965 and what it is like today. In the course of one lifetime, one generation, I've seen things go downhill so quickly that if it happens for another 50 years, it's going to be long gone. And it'll be the end of the river herring as we see it. This is an area on the Ware River. I used to come here as a child. We did a lot of freshwater fishing here. This arrangement here was nothing like this when I was a kid. When the fish exit over the dam, they'll be killed in the riprap, both young and adult. This riprap here shows no purpose at all for river herring. All I want to see once again here is finning fish. And all I see right now is water over stone. Depressing. So it's not the way it used to be. When I was a kid, they were here by the tens of thousands. This place used to be full of baby herring in August, June, July, and August. And I don't ever remember a warden here. And nobody was ever here that said, don't touch those fish or don't take those fish. And I look out now and I see an invasive type of growth. I see an algae bloom in the pond, rocks without turtles. I see these snails here all over the place. I don't remember them at all when I was a kid. Not a single one. Every rock along this shoreline has snails. The dam is covered with snails. it sort of point me in the direction of a high nutrient overload here. But right now, I'm like the Indian with his tear in his eye. Deforesting, removal of native habitat, replacement by green grass and lawns, heavily fertilized, heavily insecticided. It all comes down to water quality that's been diminished over the last 50 years. And that led to the demise of the herring, and then the dam restoration project eliminated them altogether.
In the herring run in Weymouth, where the fish go to their spawning pond of Whitman's Pond, alien plants growing to an unnatural state can result in imbalances of oxygen and carbon dioxide. It can result in fluctuations in pH, all outcomes that are damaging to herring well-being.
Plants, although they give off oxygen during the day, they use oxygen at night. So when you have a pond that is full of weeds, at nighttime it can go anoxic. It can have very low dissolved oxygens, which can result in fish kills or slow growth. So if you're a little river herring trying to grow up in a pond that's full of weeds, every night the oxygen goes down and your growth rate's going to go down too.
Phil, you know, you hear the term keystone species, and in concept I kind of understand the big fish eat the little fish. But what was interesting in this clip to hear that river herring are omega-3 carriers up the food chain, and omega-3 fatty acids, as we know, are most important to brain development, as we heard in the video. Another startling thing in that documentary were the fish counts. Phil, what's up with the fish counts on Weymouth's Run? What was it like last year, and how does that compare to prior years?
Well, when we filmed this back in 2012, we started the filming here with Shervin Araya. The fish count was 450,000 herring. All were alewife. And since then, we've been in decline here in the town of Weymouth. Now, other runs have been in decline too. Pembroke was very surprised when they lost 50% of their fish last year. Now, nobody knows for sure. It's hard to say what caused massive loss of fish. But it is maintenance done by each individual town and water withdrawal for purposes of the town, different usage that cause the most decline in population. We have here in Weymouth, we have a pump on Washington Street that is extremely destructive to young of the year fish. There's a grate over the intake to the system that does not exclude larval fish. It does not exclude small young of the year fish. Until the fish reach an average of 3 inches in size, they are not excluded from the intake of the pump on Washington Street. Now, this is a severe problem in the town of Weymouth. When you're working to improve herring counts, and then you have to put up with a pump system that diverts water to Great Pond that kills off fish, it's very frustrating for me to even keep involved in this fishery.
Well, I hope with Mayor Headland's working group, which I hear he's starting back up to maintain the pond, that this can be brought to their attention. It's very disheartening to hear that the level of frustration you have with the work that you do compared to another problem on the herring run.
Yes.
So let's see what kind of attention we can get to that next.
Well, that would be great to bring some attention to these problems. The other problem we have is an invasive weed problem, and we don't really know how to handle it. What needs to be done is dredging. That would solve a lot of it. Now, we've chose at different times to use chemicals to keep the weed growth down, and it certainly is important to keep some weed growth down. But when we use chemicals, we have to take into consideration that we're destroying zooplankton, which is the young of the year's first choice in food. So you destroy the zooplankton in a pond, and you have very little chance of producing large numbers of young in a year, which reflects on the total population of the pond. Even one bad year can send you into a series of declining years. So you got to be careful. Like I say, I know the fishery down there in the town of Pembroke, and they have a very serious problem with pollution in their pond, Oldham Pond. And the herring go up into Oldham Pond, and the town has to treat Oldham Pond because of the algae blooms there that are not only toxic to fish, but to humans.
So how does Whitman Pond compare to Oldham Pond? That's almost a scary situation to be in for spawning grounds for fish.
Well, between the two ponds, Weymouth has done a better job at connecting to storage. And that's the main problem down there in Pembroke, is massive storage that infiltrates the pond, that causes toxic algae blooms with excessive nitrogen and phosphorus levels. Now, the herring are a phosphorus sink. That means they absorb phosphorus when they come into the pond, and they take it back to the ocean where it's dispersed. So to lose a herring population is going to be, you're going to have increased treatments in your pond because you're going to lose that phosphorus sink. So
Phil, you hear all of this and you hear the science, and I sit there and wonder, well, what can I do? You know, I don't pollute the pond, and I know that there are people who are around the pond with gardening and organic gardening. Is there anything they could do with lawn care to kind of help reduce that phosphorus that's running into the watershed?
Well, I think we've been well aware that we shouldn't use fast release chemicals like on lawn cares, which require abundance of nitrogen in order for the lawn to survive properly. A better choice would be not to have a green lawn, would not to plant grass, to plant flowers and shrubbery in your yard that benefit wildlife. Green grass has very little benefit to wildlife, and we've become accustomed to paying too much attention to green grass, and we all should get away from green grass and its destructive nature to the ponds and river systems.
Well, we'll see how this herring run goes this year. I know we're excited to kind of see what you do and watch the fish come in, and you know, we'll look to see you on the run again and hear more about as the herring run up to Whitman's Pond this year. Happy spring to everyone, and
Really?
Thanks, Phil, for joining us. How long have you been a herring run warden?
Well, I think I started providing for the herring run in great detail in 1996, so it's been 25 years, Trish. And I've been glad to be part of it. It sort of took over my fishing. My vineyard days were over. I used to spend a lot of time down in Martha's Vineyard fishing down there. I fished all the weekends. I was there every weekend, and I was there in all my vacation time for 20 years. I learned a lot about fish and fisheries by my going to the vineyard and hobnobbing with some people who really understand environmental systems. So that was a benefit to me that I could bring back here to the town of Weymouth to try to run a herring run successfully. And I was glad to do it.
Well, we're really blessed to have such a dedicated herring run warden on the run in Weymouth, and thanks so much, and we will see you soon.